I think that there are a lot of that old guard that take the demographics of the city for granted. They are still operating that there's 800,000 people in this city, and there's not. They're still operating like there's a million people in this city, and not. If you're a black candidate and you're thinking that you're going to come to Detroit and win just off the backs of you're black and so is the electorate, that doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. There's not enough people here to do that. And beyond that, as you said, Jared, you got to give the people something to be excited about, something to want to get up and mobilize for. And we're not seeing that locally.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Daily Detroit. It's Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. I am Jer Stays. It is the day after my birthday, and I am still here, still alive on this planet, and glad to be so. And to my right is none other than the indefatigable Norris Howard. How are you?
I love those multi-point word scores. I appreciate that. And happy belated birthday to our fearless leader, Jer Stay.
I am your fearless but not dear leader.
No, not that.
There's no dear leadership here.
No dear leaders here.
All right, so we're going to take a couple bites at this apple with the show with different people and different perspectives. But obviously, the primary election was on Tuesday, and we're not going to unpack everything in one show because, as I said, like people have different perspectives. I want to bring them to the table. But Norris Howard, your perspective, I think, let's just be honest, is pretty important. Your knowledge in the city, your knowledge in your communities, and also just your interest in covering politics over the last few years, I think is really valuable. And I think we're going to talk about a few key races. I think we're going to talk about U.S. Senate. We're going to talk about Hill Harper. We're going to talk about Sri Tanadar. We're going to talk about representation. Let's unpack this in a few different ways. First off, Elissa Slotkin dominated the U.S. Senate primary with 76% of the vote. This is something that we predicted here on Daily Detroit.
Correct.
People in the comment section did not like us for this, but it panned out kind of exactly as I thought. And it also panned out how I thought in that Hill Harper would win in the city. And he did with 59% of the vote as of this recording as the precincts are in. But the problem is that Detroit didn't turn out. It's like 16% voter turnout or something like that.
Yeah, Detroit didn't turn out. And
even if it had, he still would have been obliterated.
Yeah, way behind. Here's the thing about Elissa Slotkin that I think a lot of not just folks in the city, but just folks who are on the progressive wing of the party, I think, fail to realize is that the coalition of the middle and the coalition of the desire to be in the middle is much larger than the progressive wing of the party, I think, gives it credit for. Obviously, we can talk about, having these political firebrands that get people really excited. And, our Kamala herself is a more progressive candidate than she gets credit for. But Elissa Slotkin represents a faction of the Democratic Party that people still kind of long for, especially as we talk about Oakland County, Ingham County, Washtenaw County, or certain parts of Washtenaw County, Monroe County.
Hey, she did really well in Washtenaw County.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's be honest. We break down the data, and look, I hear this on social media all the time, and I don't want to break anyone's hearts, but lawn signs are a terrible sign of
don't do that.
Do not use lawn signs as your indicator of support.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
there's a reason why campaigns don't give away lawn signs anymore. You only get one generally if you make a donation. And when a campaign's handing out free ones, and I don't know which ones are, but when they're handing out free ones, it's a sign they're in trouble.
Yeah, it's a bad sign. And,
it's a bad sign.
That's but
Tim Walz is in the room. Hello, Governor Tim Walz.
But the thing about it is that, Slotkin is being held up on a national scale as something we should march towards, a type of person, a type of politician that we should emulate. Not only is she potentially could be one of the youngest senators in the country, but she sort of represents this coalition of the middle that people kind of miss. And
disaffected Republicans.
There's that.
You got that little, it's not a huge sliver, but it's enough of a sliver.
The Reagan Democrats.
Yep.
Then you have the moderate Democrats. And then you have sort of the wishy-washy ebb and flow between the parties, like college-educated white women, who we know sometimes before Roe v. Wade would go Republican and sometimes would go Democrat, depending on who the candidate was. And Slotkin has sort of captured that. But the biggest thing is she has a pull on the suburbs. period. She has the suburbs. And if we're talking about Metro Detroit in particular, if you capture all the suburbs, you win. The city of Detroit, if it doesn't have at least 35-40% turnout, if you win the suburbs, you win the election.
I think that the 38% for Hill Harper and Dearborn was pretty telling. And I'll tell you why. He ran real heavy on Israel-Palestine. And I think it's an important issue for a number of people, but it's not their number one issue.
Or it's not their only.
Not their only issue. Yeah. And I don't think you're going to, foreign policy, and I know, again, another unpopular opinion, but this is bared out in the facts. Foreign policy doesn't drive elections most times. Most people skip right by it. It is a secondary or third level concern. In the state and political climate we're in, it's going to be Roe v. Wade. It's going to be a bunch of other stuff before something overseas. The economy, before something overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Hill Harper, I feel like this was an opportunity in which there were elections he could win.
Why didn't he run for Sri Tanadar seat?
He should have. Because
unless they're boys and we don't know it.
No, but he would have cleared Mary Waters, who as of right now only got about 34% of the vote compared to Sri Tanadar's 54.
Another example of Mayor Mike Duggan's political pull sometimes doesn't really extend past the city. Like he tried to get Adam Allier over, didn't work. I mean, there were other issues there, but it didn't work in the suburbs. Mary Waters is a nothing in the suburbs. No offense, this is nothing personal, but like. This district includes places like Taylor. They don't know who she is.
They don't know who she is, nor do they care.
And by the way, Taylor voted blue.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so like, that's the other thing. Like you go anywhere outside the city of Detroit, like Hill Harper doesn't exist. And you might see some lawn signs here and there.
Here in Southfield, that's it.
But that's not that. It was like a Don Quixote campaign. If he had run against Sri, I think he could have won because he does have better name recognition. There are issues that people have pointed out with constituent services and other things. But now that Sri has won again, and now with more than 50% of the vote, he's in. Like he's in. He's in.
That's his district now.
That's his district now.
Yeah, and the crazy part about it is, I said this when we were first talking about some of the issues.
13th congressional district, just to put that in there so you're following along.
Thank you so much. The thing about it that is so, I think, frustrating when it comes to this stuff is that it is so simple for people to start feeling you and to know you in this town, right? Sri Tanadar ran a very straightforward campaign. He got in the streets, shook hands, kissed babies, ran a couple commercials.
Every barbecue.
But he had one commercial. He had a commercial and outlined his stance, talked about what he was going to fight for in Washington. And that it was very straightforward. You didn't see that from Waters. You didn't see that from Hill Harper.
I got nothing from Mary Waters as a resident. I got nothing from Mary Waters, but I did get two different hit pieces on her, bringing up some inconvenient things about her truth. Because look, it's been settled, whatever. But there are issues in the past, and there was no answer for it. Mm-hmm. But it was piece after piece of like, hey, she's been investigated. She's, pled guilty to certain things. And like, if you want to defeat an incumbent, you got to, do we need a deeper bench? I think we need a new generation and a deeper bench.
Yeah. And listen, I was very excited about the Senate race because, here you have, two relatively young people, two people who will be completely new to the Senate, regardless of who would have won. And then they're running against, or Slotkin, it seems like he's going to be running against Mike Rogers, who has, in the past 6-7 years, kind of went off the deep end a little bit. He went
very MAGA Republican, and I think that got him through the primary, but the Mike Rogers of 10 or 12 years ago, I think this is a closer fight. The Mike Rogers of today
against Elissa
Slotkin, with the issues at play today and what matters, especially as we've talked about those other issues, I think this is Elissa's race to lose.
It is. And I think also people are going to look at her as the young, exciting, new energy, new wave candidate, new generation candidate. And there's a lot of people that are going to be okay with that. Listen, look, if we look at the raw numbers as they stand right now, Slotkin's clocking over 700,000 votes to Rogers 550. If we just took that at face value.
With the primary, yeah.
With the primary. But if we just took that at face value and said, okay, that's where they're landing, she beats him. So, for the stance of all the other races, congressional races, and all that good stuff. New people are starting to win these races, and the old guard are starting to be pushed away. And I think the sooner a lot of those folks realize that, the easier it will be for us to transition into new leadership. Look at what's happening with the presidential race.
You make that point about new leadership. I also see that it's a smaller race. It's a state race, a state house race, but friend of the show, Mike McFall, drubbed Jim Fouts, the former mayor of Warren, who's very controversial, but also had a very strong base.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, it was 71% of the vote that he won with, which, his district got redrawn, all the other stuff. He formerly was, he still is until the end of this term, my state rep where I live, but he's an example of that new young leadership. And it's funny because we talk about politics sometimes on the show, and it feels like we're in a different world than some of the other political shows. But I think it's because we're where we're at, where things are going, and they are where things were.
It's operating off old information, basically.
Yeah.
For us, obviously we live and breathe this stuff more than the average human being. But I just think when you look at the landscape from a national point of view all the way down, I believe there's a reckoning coming. And I believe that, unfortunately, the conservatives are going to have to find something fast. They're going to have to find a new brand of leader, because I think the Trump brand right now is getting really stale to a lot of people, even Republicans. You're starting to see, I don't know if you saw in Arizona, they had the Republicans against Trump. Or the Republicans for Kamala is what it was. Let me make it less antagonistic. But they had the Republicans for Kamala rally that they had there. There's something happening in the country in which we're seeing that newer leadership come to the fore, and I think people are getting excited about it.
I want to circle back to local and talk with you specifically, because I think you can address it specifically. Black leadership in Detroit. This is Sheree winning, you're looking at everything else. Mm-hmm. We're still in the same status. And how are you feeling about that? I know that's something that's been an undercurrent and people talking about, but it didn't show up at the polls, and the issue didn't energize voters to come out to the polls.
No, it didn't. And that's what I'm saying. If you want to complain about representation at the polls, go vote. It's as simple as that.
Or give people a reason to vote, and I don't feel like there was
no.
one.
If and again,
I was voter 20. My precinct had nothing going on.
I've said this on the show, and I think a lot of people sort of, I don't want to say disagree with me, but I think it's a thing that they don't hear very much, which is, I think that there are a lot of that old guard that take the demographics of the city for granted. They are still operating that there's 800,000 people in this city, and there's not. They're still operating like there's 1 million people in this city, and not. If you're a black candidate and you're thinking that you're going to come to Detroit and win just off the backs of you're black and so is the electorate, that doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. There's not enough people here to do that. And beyond that, as you said, Jared, you got to give the people something to be excited about, something to want to get up and mobilize for. And we're not seeing that locally. I think that there are a lot of that old guard that take the demographics of the city for granted. They are still operating that there's 800,000 people in this city, and there's not. They're still operating like there's 1 million people in this city, and not. If you're a black candidate and you're thinking that you're going to come to Detroit and win just off the backs of you're black and so is the electorate, that doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. There's not enough people here to do that. There's a reason why people who have strong in-person ground games in Michigan win elections. That's why. Because people are not as glued in here as you think they are in other larger cities. In the city of Detroit, you got to show up to the barbecue. You got to be at Belle Isle. You got to be at the Grand Prix. You got to be at the parties, the birthday parties, and all this other stuff. You have to show up. If you don't, we don't care.
Well, there's a reason why one of the top ways people find our shows are the little postcard flyers we leave at coffee shops and bars and things, because that's where people are at. You got to meet people where they're at. They're busy. They're doing stuff. They're not the very online crowd is even smaller here.
It is, because we're still it goes back to our history as builders, okay? This is the Rust Belt, all right? We are a tactile people. We like making stuff. And for as much as I want us to get away from that, that extends into how we operate our politics. We're hands on, man.
So let's end on a national note and still talk about turnout. How do we feel about Vice President Kamala Harris and if she's going to get people out? Because there is a debate. Like, are people going to be energized? Because they weren't for the primary. And I wonder if I think the candidate matters. I think she's going to energize more turnout than I think a lot of cynics do. But I would like to hear your read and see it. You can feel free to tell me I'm absolutely wrong.
No, I think you're kind of spot on. I think not only will she energize people, I don't think we'll see record turnout like the Obama years, but we're going to see big turnout. And I think we're going to see big turnout because there's a reason why she is coming to specifically Detroit the same day we're recording this show. There's a reason. She's going to be here a lot. She's going to be here a lot. She knows not only is Michigan a battleground state, but it is served as bellwether for how the election will go for the country, right? Like, it's a pretty critical state. And, looking at the fact that her rally has, I don't want to say sold, but has booked 50,000 people, or at least had 50,000 people who are interested, who have requested to go to the rally, that's incredible. Like, I have not heard of that in recent memory, to be perfectly honest with you, not even for the Trump campaign. And so the way I look at it is this hits the cross section of so many ideals, so many issues, and she no longer has that barrier of having to beat other Democrats and having to beat other progressives, which was her big hurdle. You put her up against, I think, just about any conservative, and I think she clears them, not just based on her record, but based on what the energy you see moving behind her right now. I think we're on par to see some pretty big turnout.
I will use this opportunity to say the door is open, Madam Vice President or Mr. Governor, to come here on Daily Detroit. I don't think it'd ever happen, but if it did, it would be wonderful.
It would. And you know what? We didn't even get a chance to really talk about that. And I think people are really excited by our VP pick. Like, I think...
I'm looking for tips on how to make my muffler sound better.
Yeah. I mean,
he is so gonna be America's dad.
Yeah, but
we kind of need that.
I think that was a masterstroke.
We're looking for America's dad, not America's dictator.
Yeah, and I think that was a masterstroke because people want to feel like they know their politicians, and everybody knows that guy. Like, everybody knows Walz. Like, everyone.
My follow-up, though, is in your community, there's been a lot of, we mentioned a little bit before, but like third party, a lot of energy around different things. Do you think it's the candidate that is Kamala Harris kind of wraps that all together and it's like, okay, we can go forward with this person now and kind of gets that distraction kind of out of the way?
I mean, I think so. I think it gets the distraction out of the way, but I think what makes Walz strong is not only what he's done in Minnesota. I mean, he's supported a number of incredibly progressive legislation. He's banned book bannings. He was
for same-sex marriage before it was a thing.
Yeah, he's always been for same-sex marriage. He's been somebody that also touches on so many middle American issues. He's a veteran, he's a guy that has been a teacher. Like, these are the things that people look at.
Like, you look at Tim, and he's like, if you live in Fraser or something, you're going to see Tim roll out from underneath working on the car next door to you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, he's very relatable in that way.
Like, you know that guy. But
you're asking him to help start your generator.
But I think what he brings is that level of humility and that level of folksiness that is actually going to be hard for Kamala in the general election. I think
was the lane that theoretically JD Vance could have done.
But
he did not do.
No, because
it got weird.
Yeah.
And I know that's another thing that weird stuck so well, but from a communications point of view, it makes perfect sense. There are people who were messaging me being like, how did weird stick
because
when everything else did?
Because everybody knows weird when they see it. Everybody knows weird when they hear it. Like, that's the thing. Like, when you think about all the stuff that we've been privy to over the past, 8 years, from
people want off the carousel.
Yes.
Because most people just want just live and like have stuff work and not have it be so strange.
Again, the less we think about the politics, the better it's working. The less we think about our systems, the better they are working. The fact that we've been so entrenched in politics is because everybody feels like it's dysfunctional. And I think what the Harris and Walz ticket does is you have this pretty exceptional person, in terms of her accomplishments, right? To the point where they almost kind of start to feel kind of not real. And that's difficult. Obama had the same issue. They start to feel kind of not real, right? So they pick a VP that grounds them, that makes them feel like, oh, they're a normal person. Joe Biden compared to Obama was painfully normal. Painfully so, right? And Joe Biden, is a great guy onto himself. That's what this VP pick is. I think if she would have went with Shapiro, you would have had two people who are both exceptional and fantastic and overachievers. Not to say that Tim Walz isn't an overachiever, but his demeanor, his personality, his folksiness makes people feel close to him and thus close to the campaign. And the fact that he's mastered the soundbite right now. He was the last rally he had, he was cooking. He was on fire. He was on fire, and people were laughing and they were cheering.
From the window to Tim Walz.
That's right. He was enjoying it, and people were enjoying themselves. And I think that is priceless in our politics.
Your questions, your thoughts, your suggestions, hit us up, dailydetroit@gmail.com. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Don't forget to leave 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.